Hello guys, and welcome to the Unreal Engine 5 Blueprint Beginner Tutorial. In this video I will explain what are blueprints, why you should learn them, and how to use blueprints within Unreal Engine 5. I will show you step by step how to create some blueprint actors such as this door, this health and damage boxes, this soccer goal, equipping this hat, and much more. This video is designed for complete beginners with no experience, so without further ado, let's get right into the video. Alright, so if this is your first time in Unreal Engine, first of all, make sure you obviously have the Epic Games Launcher, link in the description. Make sure you have Unreal Engine 5 downloaded. You just navigate to the Unreal Engine tab, Unreal Engine 5, and then download Early Access. Once you have Unreal Engine downloaded, you can go ahead and click Launch right here, or you can go ahead and launch from the desktop. In here, we're going to click on the Games tab and select Third Person Template. And we're going to make sure this is obviously Blueprint, and we're going to make sure we include starter content. And then we can name this Blueprint Beginner and click Create. Okay, so first I want to explain what is Blueprint. Blueprint is the visual scripting system of Unreal Engine. It can be used to create really anything, for example, cars, weapons, gameplay mechanics, user interface, AI, and much more. Let me show you what a blueprint looks like. So right now we have our third-person example project. We can hit play, and as you can see here, we have our character. We can move our camera around our character. We can use WASD to move our character around, and then we can use the spacebar to jump. This is a really simple character, and this is all made in Blueprint. So how does that work? If we press escape here, we can click on this character, right-click, browse to asset. This is going to bring up our content folder, third-person blueprints, and our third-person character blueprint right here. So this is essentially a blueprint class. This is where all of the logic of what we just saw there, the camera rotating around the character, we can move around and jump, all of that logic is built inside of this blueprint class. So I can go ahead and double-click to open that class, and we're going to see here the blueprint window. Now I'm going to take this little tab and dock it here at the top, and I'm going to start explaining everything that you see here. Alright, so this is the default blueprint editor, and we're going to start out right here with these three tabs. First we have the viewport, so you can see this is actually our character that we saw in our scene. We can move around the viewport by using WASD, just like we would in our normal viewport. We can also select items by left-clicking, and you're going to see it highlight in this Components tab. So you can see we have our character, this capsule component, and our camera. You also have your usual scaling, rotating, and translating. So we can select our character. We can scale our character by pressing R, scale up and down, Control Z to undo. We can move our character by pressing W and move our character around. And then we can also click E to rotate our character. And so we have all the basic controls that we have in the viewport. We also can adjust obviously our camera speed so that we don't fly super fast around. And we can also hit F to focus in on our object that we have selected. So let's talk about this little components window first. So essentially a blueprint is made up of these components, and it's also made up of blueprint nodes. Components can be physical objects like this, where we have this capsule component. This is supposed to be the collision for our character. We have an arrow component, so we know which way is going forward on our character. We have our character's mesh, which has its animation, so we can see our character walk around, run, and jump. Then we have our camera boom, which tells us where the camera should rotate around the character, at what length, and at what rotation point. Then we have the actual camera that we can see our character through. Then below that we have our character movement component, which tells us how to move our character around our game. And you might have noticed that when I select on different components, we have this little details window on the right. The details window tells us various details about our different components. So you can see here we have our character mesh selected, and we can see our character's scale rotation. We can actually adjust our character's scale, and we can also adjust our rotation. Then we have our animation. Then we have our actual mesh model. We have our materials and so on. So there's a lot of different things here on each different component, a lot of different details that you can tweak. All right, now moving on, we have the event graph here. The event graph is where all of the blueprint nodes are stored. So a blueprint node is basically telling us to do some sort of logic. For example, this jump right here is an event. This input action jump, when the character presses a spacebar, our character will jump. When the spacebar is released, it will stop jumping. Then over here we have our movement. When we move our character by pressing W on our keyboard, it's going to move our character forward. And then when we press left or right, it's going to move our character left or right. All right, there is a third tab right here, which is the construction script. Now the construction script is a little bit different from our event graph. And what I mean by that is everything on our event graph is executed while in the game. So this means all of the blueprint nodes in here are executed when the game starts and is running when the game is running. Okay, so in the event graph here, you can also right click to pan around and then middle mouse button to zoom. The construction script, everything off of here is executed before the game even starts. All right, so those are our three basic tabs: our viewport, where we can see what our blueprint is made of, our different components; our event graph, where we can see all of our blueprint nodes and functionality; and our construction script, where we can add things that happen before the game starts. Okay, so here on the top bar, I'm going to start over here from the left to the right. We can have our compile button. Right now you see this little yellow question mark. That means that our blueprint needs to be compiled. And when we hit compile, you can see we have a green check mark. So every time that we make a change in our blueprint, we have to hit that compile button. And what the compile button is doing is it's running through all of our blueprint nodes and checking to see if we have any errors. Then we have the save button. So this saves our blueprint. That way we can actually see the changes happen in our game. We have the browse button, which is pretty standard for all classes in Unreal Engine. If you click it, it will automatically show you third-person character blueprint that we're currently editing in the content browser. Okay, so we have a couple other things. We can find certain nodes within our blueprint. We can hide certain nodes that we don't want to see. We have our class settings. We have our class defaults. We have our simulation, so we can simulate what's going on. And then we have our play button, which is just play in a new editor window, our game. All right, and then over on the right again is our details panel. So as we select on different things, we can pull up different details on those things. So again, for our components, we can pull up different details on our camera, our character, and so on. Down here is the find results, so we can search for different nodes in our blueprint. So if we wanted to find our jump, we can see, click on the reference here, and we can see where it is in our blueprint node. So this is helpful for if we have a lot of stuff here. We can search jump, select it, and we can find it right there. It will also show us here if we have any error messages. It will tell us what is wrong and what we need to check out. So over here on the left, we have the My Blueprint tab, which shows our variables, our functions, and so on. So up first here, we have our graphs. So we have our event graph. We can see all of our different events on our event graph by hitting this little down arrow. We can also add multiple graphs. If we wanted to add another graph here, created it here, new event graph 0, and you can see here it's a new tab right here. So we can actually close that and delete that, compile and save. So if you ever close your event graph right here, you can always get back to it by selecting, double clicking your event graph, and it will show it right there. Down here we have the functions. So under our functions we have the construction script, which we talked about earlier. We can also add a new function by hitting that plus tab. We can put blueprint logic in here and call that function. So I'm going to delete it real quick. And then under here we have variables. And I'm going to skip over macros for now. And we have variables down here. And essentially a variable allows us to store data and information about our character or about various different things in our blueprint. So I'm going to go back to my event graph here, compile, save this. We're going to go over all the different variable types. So first, to create a variable in our third-person character, we're going to hit this plus tab, and you can see here we have new var 0, and it's of the type Boolean. So we can go ahead and name this is dead ? And you can see here on the right we have the details panel, and so we have our variable type. We can see here all of the different types of variables that we have. And then down here at the very bottom, we have the default value. It says, please compile the blueprint. In order to assign any sort of value here, we have to first compile and save our blueprint. Then you can see here we have this little checkbox. You see if we check it, it means true, and if we uncheck it, it means false. So a Boolean is essentially a true or false statement. So we can say, is our character dead? True means this checkbox. Unchecked means false. So let's go ahead and show this by creating our first blueprint node. In our event graph, we're going to zoom in here, right click, and you're going to see here we have all actions for blueprint. And you can see here we have a bunch of different things. We have add event, animation, audio, character, cinematics, all this different stuff. So basically we can right click and we can add certain nodes, events, and functions. So for example, we're going to add an event begin play, and you're going to see here we search at event begin play. We can go ahead and left click this, and you're going to see here this event begin play node. So what an event begin play is every time we hit play, our event begin play is going to be called. Everything off of this node is going to be executed. And what I mean by that is if you actually drag off of this little arrow, you can see here we have a little line. And if we let go of that, you can see we have our little search window where we can add another node. So we're going to add a branch. We'll go ahead and click that. And you can see here we have on our event begin play, we're going to do a branch. Now a branch checks to see if a Boolean is true or false. So if we select our isDead Boolean, we can drag it into our blueprint node, and we can either get the variable or we can set the variable. Now we don't want to set the variable, we want to get it. So we'll go ahead and click on that, and you can see we can drag off of the isDead variable and hook it up to the branch. So basically what we're doing here is when we hit play, we're going to check and see if the player is dead. If they are dead, we can do another node and type in print string. And our print string will print out a little message on our screen. And you can see here the default message is hello. I'm going to change this to character is dead. And then off of our false, we can drag off of here and type in print string. And we're going to name this player is not dead. So now, if we compile and save our blueprint, we can hit play. And you can see here player is not dead up in the top right screen. It might have been too quick, so we can adjust that by selecting our node right here. Click this little down arrow, We're going to change the duration here to 10 for 10 seconds. We'll go ahead and hide that. Click this little down arrow and do the same thing, change that to 10 seconds. Then we'll compile and save that. So we hit play again. You can see here our player is not dead. And the reason why is because we select our Boolean variable here, or right over here. You can see the default value is set to false, which means that on event begin play, is the player dead? Nope. Print string, player is not dead. So you can see here, Blueprint is basically a node-based system. So we have these different nodes that we can connect together to create a simple flow of gameplay logic. Now, what we can go ahead and do is we can select our variable is dead. We can go ahead and check this little box to make it true. So we can compile, save, hit play. You can see our character is dead. So as you can see here, a Boolean is very simple. It has two values, either true or false. Let me talk a little bit about the Blueprint Editor Graph, especially if this is your first time using the Editor Graph. So you can select various objects by left mouse drag, and you can see here we selected these objects. We can move them around in a group. You can select more objects like so. You can also disconnect these pins here by clicking Alt and left clicking, and then left click to drag to reconnect. You can also hold down Control, click right here, and move it to a different pin. And then we can hit Alt, left click to unpin that. We can also select and hit Delete, and then Control Z to undo. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the other different types of variables that we have, such as the integer, string, and so on. So let's go ahead and add a new variable. We're going to change this to integer, and then we're going to name this to myInt. So you're going to see here at the bottom, please compile the blueprint to set the default value. So we're going to compile, save this. So an integer is a whole number. You see here we can type in any number. We have 0 first. We can do 1, 2, 300, 5,000, any whole number. What an integer is not is 1.0, 3.0, 0.09. It is not a decimal. It is only whole numbers like 1, 400, and so on. So for our integer variable type, we can store information such as our player level, how much ammunition our character's weapon has, and so on. Okay, next up, we'll create another variable, and we'll go into the Details tab and select the type. We can change this to a float. Now we can name the variable type to myFloat, and then we can compile and save that. Now you're going to see here we have our float value is 0.0. So a float is a decimal number. So we can do 1.1, 35.3, 29.001, 0.001, and so on. We can have any sort of decimal number. This is very helpful for doing stuff like health or any sort of percentages like 90%, 100%. Okay, let's go ahead and create another variable. We're going to change the variable type here to string. So a string is a string of either numbers, letters, characters, and whatnot. So we'll name this myString. Compile and save that. Then in our string here, we can type whatever we want. And then off of our event begin play, we can go ahead and just delete all this. And drag off of here and do print string. And then we can drag myString, get myString, and hook it up into the print string. Compile, save, hit play. You can see our string is printed off in the top left. So a string is really good for storing, text information that is numbers, letters, and characters. let's create another variable. We're going to change this of the type vector and rename this to my vector. Compile, save that. Our vector here and the default value you can see is made up of 3 different values. So we have an X, a Y, and a Z. You can also hit this little down arrow and it's the same thing, X, Y, and Z. So a vector tells us pretty much the 3 points on each axis of a 3D object. So if we hit to our viewport here, you can see here down on the bottom left we have this. We have the X axis, the Y axis, and the Z axis. And you can also see this if we select our character. You can see here the Y, the X, and the Z. Back in our event graph on our vector, and to demonstrate our vector, we can do something like get world location, and we'll do this get world location of our capsule component. So basically this is getting the location of our character in our scene, and it's returning this vector. So then we can go ahead and take our vector and we're going to drag it in here, and instead of getting it, we're actually going to use the set. So setting a variable allows us to modify the variable default value to whatever we want it to be. So we can go ahead and hook that up to my vector. We can go ahead and delete this string up here and click Alt, click right there to disconnect that, and then select this, drag this up here, and connect the event begin play into the set. And then off of our vector here, we're going to go ahead and actually print the string like so and hook that up. So if we hit play here, you can see it prints our character's location on the screen. And we can actually do something else, like deleting our event begin play, right click and add a key. So we can type in R key, and you can see here we have all the different keys on our keyboard. So we're going to select our R key. So when we press R on our keyboard, we're going to get our capsule component, which is our character, get its world location, set our vector value, and then print it to the screen so we can see what it is. So we'll go ahead and compile, save that, hit play. Now every time we press R, you can see our vector change on the screen because our character is moving around, and it's every time we press R, it's getting that variable, setting it, and printing it to the screen. Alright, so let's go ahead and create another variable. And lastly here we can select vector and change this to a rotator. Name this my rotator. Compile, save that. You're going to see here a rotator is the same as a vector, but essentially it's a rotation. So if we head back to our little viewport here, if we go to E, we can rotate our character. And on the right of our details, you can see our rotation of our character change based on what we rotate our character. You can see here this is our rotator. A rotator variable is essentially just a rotation value. Okay, now last but not least, we can add another variable and change this to transform. We do my transform, compile, save that. And in the default value, we hit this down arrow and you can see it is a location, a rotation, and a scale. So it is all 3 of those variables plus the scale that determines a transform. And if we head back over to the viewport and select our mesh, you're going to see that we have this transform here, the location, rotation, and scale. It's just made up of those 3 different variable types. Okay, let's go ahead and delete all this stuff that we created here. Delete everything on the graph, and delete isDead, myInt, float, string, rotator, vector, transform, and compile, save that. So those are all the main variables that you need to be aware of within Blueprint. Now let's go ahead and create our first Blueprint actor. So we can go to our content drawer here, And under our content folder, we can go ahead and create a brand new folder by right-clicking and add a new folder. We can name this Blueprints. And in our Blueprints folder, we can go ahead and open that up. Right-click, add a new folder, and we're going to call this Door Blueprint. In our Door Blueprint folder, we're going to right-click and add a blueprint class. So this is how you add blueprints to your game. Click on the blueprint class. You're going to see we have all of the different blueprint class actors. Off the bat, we have actor, pawn, character. Then we have a couple other ones which I'll have to explain in another separate video. But basically, the player controller is where you could put information to control your character. Game mode base is where you'd store all the game rules. Down here, we have all the classes. So we have animation blueprints, camera blueprints, all sorts of different blueprints, car blueprints, all that sort of stuff is built right here with all the different classes. So for us, we're just going to create a simple door. So we need a simple actor blueprint. An actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. That's exactly what we need, so we'll go ahead and click actor. We're going to name this BP underscore door. BP because it's short for blueprint. Underscore is the naming convention of Unreal Engine. It's best to adopt a naming convention. That way you don't have all your files be just named whatever, and you can very easily know exactly which files are which. Okay, so we'll go ahead and double click our BP underscore door to open it up. We can dock this tab at the top. So you can see here we have our basic blueprint editor, just like our third person character. We have our little viewport here. We have our construction script, our event graph, and our details panel, components, and so on. So for our door, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new component. And you can see here we have all the different components. So we have audio, we have a skeletal mesh. A skeletal mesh is like our character mesh. Our static mesh, which is an object that is static, it doesn't move or doesn't do anything. We have a plane, a sphere, and a cube. These are just basic shapes, and so on. What we need to do for our door is we need to add a simple door mesh. So we can add a static mesh, and this is going to be named door frame. Compile, save that. Make sure you obviously have in your content browser here the starter content. If you forgot to add this somehow when you were creating your project, not to worry, you can always click this little add button, add feature or content pack, and then on the right, under content packs, we can add the starter content to your project if you haven't done so already. So back in our content drawer, we're going to go to prompts. You can see here we have this SM underscore door, and this SM underscore door frame. SM is short for static mesh. So what we're going to do is assign here this static mesh door frame. So to do that, we can actually drag our door frame mesh right here into the details. Because we have our door frame selected here, we have our static mesh right here. So now if we hit into the viewport, you can see here we have our door frame. Let's go ahead and add another mesh. Click this add button, static mesh, we're going to add a door. So with our door selected, we can actually just go to our static mesh here and click this down arrow. And we have this little search window. So we can search door. And you can see here we have our SM underscore door. We can go ahead and click that. You can see we have it assigned there. We also have the materials, our location, rotation, and so on. So in our viewport, we can see our door is not exactly where we want it to be. And what we're going to do is move our door by hitting W to move. And then we're going to select this on the Y-axis and move it over like so. You can see here it's not lining up the best and we can't seem to get it perfect. So what we want to do is change our grid snapping value. Hit that little tab right there. set this to 1, and this is going to give us more control over our snapping. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. We can go ahead and compile, save that. Now we have our little door here and our door frame. And if we click E, we can rotate our door on the Z axis right here. Okay, Control Z to undo, obviously. Compile, save that. Now what we want to do here is we want to allow our character to open and close the door. So what we can do is add a collision box or a box collision. And so when our character runs into this box collision, we can give them the ability to open and close this door. Let's go ahead and click R to scale this box. If we hit the little cube in the middle, we can scale the entire thing. If we just select the Z axis or the X axis, we can scale only in those directions. Okay, and we hit W to move this up. Scale this up a little bit. Maybe make it just a little bit wider, like so. Compile, save that. So now that we have our components set up, let's add the blueprint nodes in our event graph. So what we need to do is go to our event graph. You can see here it's automatically given us these events, or event begin play, event begin overlap, and event tick. These are all grayed out, but you can still use them by just dragging off and doing like a print string. You can see the gray goes away because you're using them. Okay, we are not going to actually use any of these, so we can go ahead and delete. And then what we want to do is select our box collision, and in the details here we can scroll down all the way down till you see these events. To see what these events do, let's go ahead and move this little window right here by selecting that and moving that over. Now you can see here we have different events for different things. We have on component hit. Then what we're interested in is this on component begin overlap. So when our character overlaps, we want to click this little plus button so we can add that event. So whenever something like a character overlaps in our viewport here, or box collision, this event will be called in the event graph. And so what we want to do is check to see if the other actor is our character. So our character, if you remember, is our third person, BP third person character. So back in our door here, we want to drag off of the other actor and do a cast to third person character. And what the cast to third person character will do is it will check to see if the overlapped actor is a third person character. And if so, it will execute whatever is farther off of here. And if not, it will fail like so. Alright, so off of our cast the third person character, we're going to do an enable input, and we're going to enable input for our character that is overlapped. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to get player controller, and you want to hook this up into the player controller here. And so we're going to check and see if it is a third person character that is overlapped. If so, we want to enable input for that character, for that character's controller. That way they can interact with the door. We also want to select our box and add an event and overlap. That way we can disable input. So we can do another cast to third person character. And then off of here, we can drag and do disable input. And we can hook up the return value instead of player controller to the target. Compile, save that. Next up, we have to add the actual key to open and close the door. So we can right click, type in E key. We're going to scroll up here until you find the E key. Click on that. So off of here, we're going to do what's called a flip-flop. And what a flip-flop allows us to do is to do an A or an B. So if we press it once, it's going to do the A, and then when you press it again, it's going to do the B. So it automatically remembers which one you did last, and it cycles through A or B. Now off the A, what we want to do is we want to get the door skeletal mesh, and you can see we can actually drag our door component into our blueprint. So we can get the references of our components and do things with them in our blueprint. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to get our door here, and we want to rotate our door when we press this E key. So to do that, we can drag off of here and set relative rotation. And what we want to set this to is to 90. And hook that up into the A. Select that, copy, Control C, Control V. And to hook that up to our B. And we want to set this back to 0. So when we press E once, we want to rotate the door 90 degrees. When we press it again, we want to rotate it back to 0. So let's go back into our third-person example map. Go to our content drawer, blueprints, door blueprint. We can drag our blueprint into our level here. So when we hit play, we can go over to our door and press E. You see we can open and close our door by just pressing E. Now it might look a bit snappy because it's just doing 90 degrees, 0, 90 degrees and 0. And what we can actually do is add a timeline that will smooth the value between 0 and 90. That way we get a nice smooth open transition. So back in our blueprint door, we can go ahead and delete this right here. Hit Alt, left click there, select that and move that over. Off of our A here, we're going to do a timeline. And select this, add a timeline. We're going to name this our door timeline. And you can see here we have a couple different options. We have play, play from start, stop, reverse, and then our output we have our update and finished. So to actually modify this timeline or to use it, we have to double click it to open it. So right now there's nothing here, and to add a track on the timeline we can click this add float track. Okay, and a timeline essentially is exactly what it sounds. So at the 0 second we can set a value right here, and you can see our timeline is currently up to 5 seconds long. So on 5 seconds long we can set a certain value to create a very smooth curve. So let's go ahead and right click anywhere on our timeline. We can add a key. You can see it added this little dot, and we can see the time and the value. So what we want to do is set the time to 0. So at 0 seconds we want our value to be 0. Okay, then anywhere on the graph we can right click, add a key, and we want to change the time here to 2 seconds, and the value is going to be 90 degrees. You can see here we can't see our value anymore. So to actually see our graph now, we can hit this zoom to fit horizontal and zoom to fit vertical. Now one more thing, we want to set our length here to the maximum of 2 seconds so that our timeline is only as long as our value right here. And then we also want to make this curve smooth. So we can select, shift, and left click and drag to select, right click and click auto. And this gives us this little curve. So you can select that point and drag it like so. Now you can see we have this nice smooth curve. And what this is doing is it's outputting a value of the variable type float. So we can go back into our event graph here. You can see here our new track 0 outputs this value of a float. And what the timeline does is it says at 0 seconds, do nothing. At 0.2 seconds, output the value of 12, then 26, 30. So it does this really nice smooth rotation to 90 degrees. So back in our event graph, we can go ahead and hook this up. what we want to do is, you might notice first off, this is a float, and then this is a rotator. So how exactly is this going to be compatible? If we drag here, you're going to see float is not compatible with rotator. So to actually do this, we can drag off of our rotation and do a make rotator. And you're going to see here it has these X, Y, and Z, which are float variables that are actually compatible with our door timeline. So off our new track 0, we're going to hook this up to the Z, because remember we want to rotate our door on the Z axis right here. And the reason why you know this is the Z axis is by the color. It's blue, and you can see Z right here is blue. So back in our event graph, we've hooked that up. We want to plug the update into the set relative location. One more thing, off of our B, we want to play the timeline in reverse. Okay, so we can compile, save this, go back into our level, we hit play, we hit E. You can see our door opens and closes with a really nice, smooth rotation. And so again, the way this is possible is because we're playing this timeline that has this smooth transition between these two values, 0, 0 and 0, 90. It's outputting that value every second to set the rotation of our door. So we get that nice, smooth door open animation. So that's pretty much our door blueprint in a nutshell. A very simple open and close, made entirely from blueprints using components and blueprint nodes. Alright, so let's do something a little bit more challenging. Let's go ahead and make a hat pickup actor. So first of all, make sure you obviously have the Blueprint Beginner project files downloaded. I'll leave a link in the description below. What we want to do is pop open our content drawer here. We're going to go ahead and just dock this in our layout so that we can see our content browser at all times. Okay, in our content, we want to add a new folder and call this project files. And then what we can go ahead and do is just select everything in the project files that you have downloaded and drag them right into your content browser. Just leave everything at the default settings and we'll just hit this import all. Alright, now you'll see here it automatically imported the materials for our static meshes, and that's fine, we can leave that as is. And it will compile shaders. It's just going to take a minute. Alright, now that our assets are finally imported here, we're going to use this little hat mesh. So to create our little hat pickup, we want to go to our blueprints folder, right click, add a new folder. We're going to name this hat pickup blueprint. In here, we're going to right click and add a new blueprint class of the type actor. And we can name this BP_hat pickup. We can double click this to open it up. And in here, we're going to add a component, a static mesh component for our hat. We're going to name this hat mesh. And in our static mesh, we're going to search for SM_hat and assign it like so. And we can see here we have this nice little hat. Alright, next up we need to add a spear collision. And so this collision will allow us to, when the player enters this collision, we can check to see if they press E. If they do, then we can put the hat on the character's head. So let's go ahead and scale this up a little bit and move it up like so. Let's actually take our hat and move it up a little bit like that. And we can scale up our hats 1.5, 1.5, and 1.5, just so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, so in our event graph, we're going to go ahead and delete these nodes right here and select our spear, scroll down to the very bottom and add a event begin overlap, and then again an event end overlap. And then very simple, what we're going to do is off of here, we're going to enable input. And then very simple, what we're going to do is drag off of our other actor, cast to third person character. So again, we're going to check to see if the character is overlapping. If so, we're going to enable input. And off of the player controller, we're going to get player controller at index 0. Then off of our end, we're going to drag off other actor, cast to third person character, and then we're going to disable input and hook up the player controller to the target like so. Now what we want to do is we want to add our key to pick up the actor. So we'll add another key, so do key, and we'll actually just do the E key. So scroll up and select E key. Really, you can do any key that you want. And then we're going to drag off of the other actor and cast to third person character. So when our character overlaps this, and if they press E, we're going to cast to them. And now what we want to do is we want to equip this hat on the player's head. And so what we need to actually do is add some blueprint nodes inside of our third person character. So go back to your example map here. We can select our character, right click, and a fast way to get to the blueprint is we can actually hit this edit third person character. That takes us directly to the blueprint. So what we want to do here is we want to create a new event that we can call inside of our hat pickup. So what we can do is right click, add custom event. And a custom event allows us to do whatever we want. So we can name this event equip hat. And then all the logic off of here we can do to equip our hat. So first of all, let's go ahead and add a new component in our third person character called static mesh. And this will be our hat mesh. We don't want to set any static mesh here because we just want it to be empty for now. We're going to drag our static mesh component onto our graph. Then we want to set static mesh and hook up our equip hat to our set static mesh. Then what we want to do is we want to set our static mesh here to our hat mesh. Another way we could actually do this is we can pass the variable through the event. So we can actually drag off of here and onto the event, and you can see here it added a new input for our event. So this is a very easy way to pass data through events. Back into our hat pickup, we can drag off of our third person character reference, and we can call that event by doing equip hat. And you can see here we have that same exact node that's in our third person character. And we can also set our hat mesh. So in here we can actually set our static mesh to our hat. The same hat that we have in here. And when our character presses E, it will cast to our third person character. And if we double click this, it will take us to that event in our character. So it's going to pass that information to the set static mesh, which will set our static mesh here to the hat that we have in our pickup actor. Now if we just do this and play this, so if we drag our hat pickup into your game and hit play and press E, you can see here we have our hat on our character, but it's not on our character's head. Alright, so to attach it to our character's head, what we want to do is in our character class, we want to drag off of here and do an attach component to component. So what we want to do is take the hat mesh and attach it to our mesh, which is our character. Drag that into our scene and hook that up to the parent. So for our socket name, this is going to tell us where in our character should we attach it? Or more specifically, where in our character's bones, should we attach it? And I'll explain this here in a second, but right now we can just name this to hat socket, like so. Make sure you have all the capitalization correct, like so. Location rule, we want to do snap the target, and snap the target. Now we can hit compile save. So now what we want to do is define this socket name in our character's mesh. So if we select our mesh right here, we can click this little browse icon, and this will take us to our content, mannequin, character, and mesh. So if we open up our character mesh, we want to move over to the skeleton tab. So right now this is just our skeletal mesh, and if you don't know what a skeletal mesh is, let's go ahead and head over to the skeletal tab right here. So just click on this little button, and a skeletal mesh is essentially a static mesh, but instead of being static, it has all these different bones. And what the bones allows our character to do is to animate and move our mesh around like so. So we can select different bones and we can rotate them around. And this is what allows our character to move its legs around, move its head around, and so on. That's basically a skeletal mesh. Okay, so here in our skeleton tab right here, we want to select our head bone. So if you scroll all the way down here, you're going to see head. Right click on there, we're going to add what is called a socket. Now the socket is what allows us to attach meshes to our character. We're going to rename this head socket to hat socket. The same exact capitalization as what we had in our character. Save that. We can close out of that. Close out of this. And now we should have everything all set up. We can also, just to keep things organized, select everything and press C to add a comment. And we can name this hat logic, just so we know what's going on. So compile save, we are now ready to test this out. If we hit play here, we can press E to equip, and then you're going to see here there's an issue. Our hat is not lined up correctly with our head. So we actually have to go ahead and adjust this. So go back into your mannequin mesh, your skeletal mesh right here. Scroll down to your hat socket. And we will actually want to rotate our hat and line it up with our character's head. So if we were to just move this little socket around, we're not going to really get a good idea of what it's going to be. So what we can do is right click the hat socket, add a preview asset, and search here SM_hat. So we can see our hat here, and it looks exactly like the issue what we had. So we hit W, we can move this up. If we hit E, we can rotate this 90 degrees. Then we hit W again, we can move this around. And if you don't like the camera speed, you can always change this in the viewport. And what we want to do is we want to line this up perfectly like so. Just like that. So we can go ahead and save that. And now if we hit play, we can press E. And you see here we have our hat equipped on our player. So one more thing, when we equip our hat, we actually don't want this hat to still be here. We want our hat to disappear. So one way we could do this is in our blueprint hat pickup. After we equip our hat, we want to destroy actor. So this will destroy the actor, which in this case it is itself, so that when we pick it up, it will disappear. Just like so. So now we have a simple hat actor, and we also have a little door that we can open and close. And again, very simple logic here. We're just checking to see if the player is running into the spear. If so, they can then enable input, and that allows them to press E, which in turn calls this event inside the character to set the static mesh and attach it to the character's head. So that's our basic hat. Let's go ahead and move on and create a simple damage box, some player health, and a simple health bar for our character. So let's go ahead and create a new folder in our blueprints, and we're going to name this to damage box. In here we're going to add a new blueprint class of the type actor, and we're going to name this to BP_damage box. Double click it to open, and we can go ahead and actually close out of all of our other blueprints. So in our viewports here, we're going to add a simple box collision, and we're going to name this to damage box. So again, in our event graph, we're going to delete this and go to our damage box and add an event begin overlap, an event end overlap. And what we want to do is we actually want to damage our character. In order to do that, we want to drag off of our other actor and cast to our third person character. And then here we can damage our character by adding a health variable inside our third person character. So actually let's go back and right click our third person character, edit the blueprint. And in here we're going to add a new variable and change the type here to float. Going to change the name here to health, compile, save that. And the default value, we can give it a value of 100 for 100 HP. Okay, so basically when our character overlaps this damage box, what we want to do is get health, and then we can do something like minus key, or you could search subtract. You're going to see here subtract the health by this value. I'm going to do 10, and then what we want to do is we want to set the character's health. So we want to drag off of the third person character and do set health to the health value minus 10. Then we want to hook up the execution pin, and then we want to do a print string, and we want to hook the health up into the string so that it converts from a float to a string. So now if we compile, save this, go to our level right here and select our damage box and drag it into our scene. Let's go ahead and actually scale this thing up like so. And if we hit play, we're not going to know where it's exactly at. So just so that we can see it, go back into your damage box, select the box collision, click this little search in details, and search hidden in game. We're going to uncheck hidden in game, compile, save that, and when we hit play, we're going to see it in our game. So now if we go into the box, you're going to see it subtracted 90, 80, 70, 60, and so on. Now this is good and all, but what I actually want to create is a damage box that continues to damage our character as long as we stand in that box. So what I want to do is to go back into our damage box, and instead of doing all of this, I'm going to select and delete this. What I actually want to do is to create an event that just loops over and over and over until our character stops overlapping with the cube. So off of here, I want to actually get our third person character and promote this to a variable. And so this will promote our character to a variable. That way we have this reference, and we can do stuff like cast from our character reference, or we can also call certain nodes just off of our variable reference there. Okay, and then off of here we're going to do a set timer by event. So a set timer by event allows us to loop a certain event over and over and over. In this case, we want to damage our player over and over. So off of our event, we'll drag here and do add custom event. I'm going to name this to damage player. Off of our damage player here, we're going to do apply damage. In the damage actor, we want to get our third person character reference, hook that up to the damage actor. Let's go ahead and change the base damage to something like 30. And then our timer, we need to set the time. So this is every second. So we change this to, say, every 2 seconds we'll play this event. And then we obviously need to check looping, so it's playing it over and over. Then let's go ahead and actually, if we hit play here, you're going to see nothing's actually happening. It's because we can't see anything actually happening. To see something happen, we can drag off of here and do a print string, and we can print the variable that's being applied to our character. So if we hit play, we can see 30, 30. And you can see here it's just looping over and over, applying 30 damage to our character. So we actually need to go into our character and add the other half of this, which is when our character receives damage. So right now we're applying damage, and in our character nothing is happening. So nothing is actually affecting our health variable. So we can add here an event called event any damage. So if any damage is applied to us, in this case the apply damage node, if it's applied to this character, it will call this event automatically. And these are events that are built in to Unreal Engine. Off of our health, we can get our health. We want to do a subtract. And we want to subtract our health by the amount of damage that we receive. And then we want to set our health to that value and hook that up like so. And then lastly, we'll want to do a print string so that we can see what's happening. Compile, save that, and hit play. Now if we stand in this circle, every 2 seconds you're going to see our health decreases 70, 40, 10, and then you see it gets into the negatives. Alright, so this is cool and all, but let's actually set up a health bar so that we can see, instead of having this print string, we can actually see our health decrease on our screen. So we can add here in our content browser, right click, add a user interface widget blueprint. And we can name this health bar _ W for widget, and double click that to open. Now this is the widget editor. This is for user interface. There's a lot of things here, and I'm not going to explain everything in this video because this is just mainly blueprint. But basically, I'll give you a basic rundown. This is like your screen, if you're looking at your player screen. And basically, we can add buttons and things onto our screen to create a user interface. So in this case, we want to add a progress bar, which is going to be our health bar. So if we scroll in here, we can drag our progress bar to something like that. And then we actually want to move our anchor right here. So on the right, anchor to the bottom left of our screen. We take this little anchor and drag it like so to match it up with our health bar, like so. And the reason why we want to anchor it is so that if we play it in a different window or whatnot, it will know where to scale this little progress bar, and our progress bar is not going to be in the middle of the screen or on the side or off the screen. Okay, so we have our little health bar here. So in the details here, the progress, you can scroll the percent. You see our health goes from left to right. So we have 1%, which is completely full. Then we have 0, which is empty. So what we can do is we can actually bind our percent. to our player's health value. So to bind this, all we need to do is click on the % create binding. And then here you can see we actually have a blueprint editor graph. So just like in our character graph here, in our user interface, we can add stuff like blueprints. So in this little progress bar function, what we want to do is we want to bind our character's health to the %. So what we can do is right click, get owning player pawn. And we want to cast to third person character. And then off of there, we can go ahead and get health. And instead of directly plugging this into our value right here, we actually need to convert this to a percentage because the output value is only a value between 1 and 0. And this is a value between 100 and 0. So we need to multiply this by 0.01. Hook that up to the return value and hook up the execution into the return node. Compile and save that. Now in our third person character, we need to actually create this widget on our screen. So we can add a event begin play. And what we want to do is to create widget. And this will create the widget that we just created and add it to our screen. So let's go ahead and select our health bar widget. For the owning player, we drag off of here and get player controller. And then after this, we need to drag off the return value and do add to viewport. So this will create our widget and add it to our viewport. Compile and save that. So hit play here. You can see here we have our little health bar on our screen. And you're going to notice it's full at 100 HP because that's our default value in our character. So if I move into here, you're going to see our health is decreasing by 30, 40, 10, and -20 and so on. So you can see here our health is updating because we bound the progress bar percentage, if we go back to the graph here, to our character's health. So we can go ahead and close that. I'm going to select this, press C to add a comment and do health bar stuff. Okay, and we can move this around like so. Alright, so one thing you might notice is if we hit play here, and if we just go in this once and get out, you're going to see it's actually still damaging us even if we're outside of the collision box. So we need to add our logic here to stop this timer, which is looping and applying damage over and over. So in order to do that, we need to drag off our other actor, cast to third person character, and we need to stop this timer. So the way that we have to stop this is we actually need to get a reference to our timer. So we can drag off the return value, promote that to a variable. We can name this variable timer ref for timer reference. Then we can drag our reference, get it, and then we can do invalidate, clear and invalidate timer by handle. Hook that up to the execution, and basically when we leave the collision box or the damage box, it will stop the timer and it will stop applying damage to our character. So we can test this out. Damaged, and we can walk out of here. You see it stopped damaging our character. Alright, so let's actually add some particle effects because say we want to have like a little fire on here, so that instead of having this little ugly box, we can actually have a fire particle effect that looks nice and actually damages our character. Open up your Epic Games Launcher, and on the Marketplace tab here, we can go ahead and search FX, and then you want to filter by free. And you're going to see this FX Variety Pack. And of course, you can always search FX Variety Pack in the search bar. But once you click on it here, you want to go ahead and add this to your project or get it. It's 100% free. So once you click add to project, and we might have to close our project here first. I'm not finding it here. I'll just restart my launcher real quick. Exit the Epic Games launcher, restart this. And then back in our FX Variety Pack, we can go ahead and add a project, show all projects, and search Blueprint Beginner. Select that. You're going to see here asset not compatible. We can go ahead and hit this drop down and select the latest version that's closest to 5. So we can do 4.26 and click add a project. So this will add the FX that we need here for a little damage actor to our Unreal Engine 5 project. And then you're going to see here this new folder, FX Variety Pack. And then we can go to particles here, and you can see we have all sorts of stuff. So we actually want to use this magic circle, which is this little fire effect to damage our character. So we can go ahead and right click, edit our damage box, and we're going to add an event begin play, spawn emitter at location. So this will spawn that particle effect. And the location we want to get actor location and hook up the vector into the location. And now all we need to do is to go back, select our magic circle, and assign it in there. And again, we can actually select and access our content browser within the blueprint. That's actually a new feature of Unreal Engine 5. But anyways, we can go ahead, compile, save that, hit play. You can see our fire effect. You can see it actually damaging our character. So another thing that I want to mention is we can obviously select our damage box and do hide, make that hidden in game. And now we hit play, we can see our little particle effect here, damaging our character over time. And of course we can move out. So now let's go ahead and add a health or a healing actor that will heal our character's HP back to normal. So back in our content blueprints damage box, we'll go ahead and add another blueprint class, actor BP underscore health box. Open that up. In here we'll go ahead and add the same thing, a collision box, box collision, name this heal box. In our event graph here, we can go ahead and delete this and select our heal box, scroll down, add our event begin overlap and our event end overlap, then off the other actor, cast to third person character. Then same thing, we want to set timer by event. So we want to loop healing our character. So off the event, we'll go ahead and add a custom event. Name this heal played. And what we want to do for this event is we want to take our character reference and get health. And you want to check and see if the health is equal to 100 HP. Okay, so is our health variable equal to 100 HP? And if so, we return this Boolean. And if you remember, the Boolean is true or false. So if we drag off our Boolean, we can do a branch and hook that up to our heal player. So before we can heal our character, we're going to check to see if our health is equal to 100. If so, we don't want to heal our character because they're already at full HP. But if not, what we want to do is we want to get health, and you want to add. So we want to add, say, 10 HP, and then we want to again drag off our character and set health and hook up the add to our health variable and hook up the false into the health. So again, we want to heal our player when they overlap. If they have less than 100, we want to heal our character 10 HP. And of course we need to set the time here, so we'll set this to every 1.5 seconds looping. We want to heal our character 10 HP. So go ahead and drag this box in here, scale this thing up, and we actually need to add our particle effect and all that good stuff. So do another event, begin play, spawn emitter at location. For our emitter template, we can just search heal aura, and then for our location, we can get actor location and hook that up to the location like so. Compile, save that. If we hit play, we can now damage our character. And then we can start healing our character by standing in here. Now you're going to see if I walk out, it's still healing our character because we forgot to add the event on end overlap. So again, what we want to do is we want to stop this timer. And again, to do that, we want to get a reference of our timer. So we'll go ahead and turn off of the return value, promote that to a variable, name this timer ref. And then off of our end overlap, cast to third person character. And we want to drag off our timer ref and clear and validate timer by handle. Compile, save that. And now everything should be working. If we go into our damage, we can damage our character. If we go into our heal, we can heal our character. And if we step out, it's going to stop. If we step back in, it's going to start. Just like so. So very simple way for damaging and healing your character, and also binding that event to your user interface. So hopefully you've learned a little bit about communicating between blueprints. All right, so next up, let's go ahead and create a soccer goal and a soccer ball actor. Go to your blueprints again, right click, add a new folder. We're going to name this soccer blueprints. And there we're going to add a blueprint class of the type actor. And we're going to name this BP underscore soccer goal. Go ahead and open this up. And in here, we're going to add a static mesh. Name this soccer goal. Compile and save that. And back in our content browser here and in the project files, remember to download the project files, link in the description. And if you haven't already, import them by dragging and dropping them into your project files. We have this soccer goal right here. And right now you can see there's no material on this net. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. In our content browser, we have this net material. Double click that. And in this material here, we want to actually add this little texture node, this mask. So we can go ahead and drag that into our net, into our graph. Change this net type to right here to masked, and hook up the RGB into the opacity mask. And now this will give us this little mask for the net. And we can also select this net and make sure it's two-sided. That way we can see from the back and front. Save that. And now our little soccer goal has this net material. So now we can go ahead and go back to our soccer goal blueprint. With our soccer goal static mesh, we can change this to SM underscore soccer goal. All right, so right off the bat, it might look big. And what we can go ahead and do is actually go to our blueprints, soccer blueprints, soccer goal, and drag this into our scene. And what I'm going to do is actually delete all this third person stuff to make room. And we can go ahead and move this, rotate it around so it's facing us. You can see it's huge. So what we're going to do is, with our soccer goal here, we're going to snap this window like so. Go back to our third person. And we're going to adjust our scale right here to be something like 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. That looks a lot better. So now we can go ahead and compile, save that. Now let's go ahead and add another component, which is a box collision. So we can go ahead and scale this box collision to be inside of this goal. So go ahead and move this up, E to scale, something like so. Now what we want to do is we want to, with our box selected, scroll down, add an event begin overlap. And right now what we want to do is when a ball overlaps our box collision, we want to spawn a explosion or particle effect to show that we scored our ball in the goal. So of course we need to actually create the ball. So let's go ahead and go back to our soccer blueprints folder. Right click, add another blueprint class of the type actor. You want to name this to BP underscore soccer ball. Double click and open it. I'm going to add a static mesh component. Name this to ball mesh. In our static mesh, we can search sm underscore ball. We see this little soccer ball. And of course, this one is also really big. If we hit this browse, we can drag this into our scene. You see it's massive. So we'll go ahead and size this down by going in our soccer ball. 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. Compiles, save that. You see that it is a lot more smaller and much better. Maybe it's a little bit too big, but for this purpose, it'll be absolutely fine. So now we have our ball blueprint. So we go back into the goal event graph. We can go off of our other actor and cast to BP underscore soccer ball. So if a ball has overlapped and entered into our goal, what we want to do is spawn emitter at location. And for our location, get our soccer goal and get world location. And then we'll just plug this into our location. We'll add maybe a little explosion, maybe this little PKY hit. Compile, save that. And so if we hit play here, you're going to notice one of two things. Our ball does not move around. So to actually let our ball simulate physics and move around, we need to go back to our soccer ball, scroll down to the physics tab with the mesh selected, and then you want to hit this simulate physics. And for our mass in kg, we're going to checkbox that and change this to 20. Compile, save that. If we hit play here, see our actor moves. We can hit it into our goal. You see here it's not going inside of our goal. This is because we need to also mess around with the collision settings on our soccer goal. Go to your soccer goal blueprint, go to your soccer goal mesh, and in this static mesh here, we want to scroll down to the collision, and under the collision complexity, we want to just use complex collision as simple. Okay, now if we save that, I'm gonna go ahead and move this back a little bit, move this like so, and then if I hit play here, I can kick our ball into the goal, and you see it played that particle effect. Now I also want the ball to actually disappear when I do that, and I also want my particle effect to be much larger and more visible to the character. So back in the soccer goal BP, first destroy our soccer ball after it's scored. So off of here we can do destroy actor, the target being the BP underscore soccer ball. Hook that up, and then for the emitter location, we can alt click there And instead of doing this, we can drag off of here and do make vector. And then off of here, we can do break vector. Hook up obviously the X and the Y. And for the Z, we can do this like 300 units higher than the location of the goal. That way it just spawns a little bit higher. If we hit play, we can run it into our goal just like that. And now the soccer ball actually isn't the smoothest when it's rolling around, and it actually needs a better collision on the model. So if we go into our project files, soccer ball, go to our collision, we can go ahead and remove the current collision that it has and add a sphere simplified collision. You see here it's this little green line, you can't really see it, but if we hit play now, it's going to roll around nice and smooth just like that. So now we can score our ball. You see it explode just like that. But right now we don't have our ball spawning back in, and so the game is pretty boring here. We can only score once and then the ball is gone. So to respawn the ball, it's actually really easy. We go back into our soccer goal blueprint, and then off of our destroy actor, we're going to do a delay. And so we're gonna wait for about 2 seconds after they scored it, and then we're going to spawn actor from class. And so the spawn actor from class spawns a blueprint or an actor. So in this case, we're going to search for our BP underscore ball underscore soccer ball. For our spawn transform, what we actually want to do is we want to right click and split this so that we have the vectors and rotator. And off of our spawn transform location, we want to drag off of here and promote this to a variable. And we can just name this to ball spawn location, like so. So compile and save that. And so now we can set the ball spawn location default value here. But instead of doing this, this would actually require me to look in the viewport and define the location and copy and paste it back into here. And if I actually wanted to move the ball around to a different spawn location, it's just not the best way. Alright, so what we want to do is create a new variable, and we're going to name this soccer ball ref. We're going to change the variable type to BP underscore soccer ball object reference. So we can actually have a reference of our soccer ball actor. And now what we can do is off the event begin play, we can get our soccer ball, check to see is valid. So this is just double checking to see if our soccer ball actually exists, if it's not actually deleted. If it is valid, we can get the actor location, and then we can set our ball spawn location like so. And now what we can do is we can actually set our soccer ball reference to instance editable and expose on spawn. Doing those check marks allow us to do is if we head back over to our level, if we select our goal, you can see under the default we have this soccer ball reference. So what we can do is we can actually hit this little selection right here, and we can actually select our soccer ball actor. And so that allows us to set a reference to the soccer ball in our scene. So now we can move our goal around whatever. We move our soccer ball around wherever. We're just gonna move it like that for now, hit play, and I can go ahead and run that into there. And you see 2 seconds later it spawns in the same exact position. And say if I didn't like that position, I can move it over here. Throw it in there. It's gonna update the position of where it spawned. So you can see here, by exposing variables, we can very easily select references and change it in real time. So that's partially the power of Blueprint, is you can expose certain variables so that you can tweak things while you're messing around in the editor. That way you don't have to do a lot of back and forth. Alright, so that's pretty much our soccer blueprint right there. You can score and it spawns a little particle effect. It respawns our little ball. Just like so. Alright, so we've created a simple door, a hat pickup, a little health bar, a soccer goal. Lastly, let's go ahead and create something a little bit more advanced, like a little hit actor, something that you see in a Fall Guys game, where you're running around the map and you have little spinny things that will hit you and make your character ragdoll and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and make that real quick. I'm going to go ahead and close all of these blueprints that I have open. And in our content browser, we can add a final folder called Hit Actor Blueprint. And in here we can add a new blueprint class of the type actor. Name this BP_hit actor. So we can go ahead and double click this to open it up. What we can go ahead and do is first add a static mesh and name this hit actor mesh. And you want to use the project files that I have included, the SM hit actor. So we can search static mesh _hit actor like so. And basically this thing is going to rotate around over and over. And when it hits the player, it's going to make our player ragdoll. So we also need to add a capsule collision around this little hit part. So we can go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees on the X and R to scale this up. Move this up like so, just around like that. I actually need to scale this a little bit larger and a little bit less, like so. And then two more things where you need to add a arrow. And so we'll go ahead and move this arrow like so and rotate it 90 degrees. Position it right in front of this. And the arrow will help us determine which way is forward for this little hit actor. And then lastly, we're going to add a rotating movement component. So the rotating movement component will automatically rotate our actor around and around. So if we compile and save this, we can actually drag this into our game here and hit play. And you can see it's automatically rotating right off the bat. Now what we want to do is we want to add an event for when this object hits us. We want it to ragdoll our character and send our character flying. So we can go ahead and go into our hit actor here. And in our event graph, we're going to delete all this. Select our capsule, scroll down, and we're going to add an event on begin overlap for the capsule. We're going to cast to third person character. And what we want to do is we want to call an event in the character that will do our hit actor event. So go to your character, select your character, edit the blueprint. We're going to add a new event. Right click, add custom event. We're going to name this hit by hit actor. So this event is going to have one input, which is this variable. We're going to change this to a vector. And we're going to name this to hit location. And we're going to go back to our BP hit actor. And now we should be able to call hit by hit actor. And we want to get our arrow. And off of that, we want to get forward vector of our arrow and put it into our variable like so. And we're getting this warning because we actually need to compile our third person character BP first before we call the hit by hit actor function like that. Then we can hook that up, compile that, and we're not getting any errors. So now back in our third person character, we need to add obviously all the logic for getting hit by the hit actor. The first thing that we need to do is when we get hit by it, we need to set simulate physics mesh. So we need to simulate our character ragdolling, and then we're going to add an impulse. So off of here, we're going to do add impulse. The target is going to be our character's mesh. And for the impulse location vector, we're going to make vector. Then we want to drag off the hit actor and do a break vector and hook up the break vector into the make vector. And then for the Z, what we want to do is put a really large number, 50,000. And then actually off of here, we want to multiply this. And then we'll right click, convert pin to float. And you want to name this to 5,000, like so. So right now, we can go ahead and test this out by going over here. And we can see our character goes flying in the air. And what we actually need to do is set our character mesh, scroll down to the collision, and we want to set the collision presets to, instead of character mesh, we want to set this to ragdoll. Compile and save that. And back in here, we can hit play. If we get hit now, you can see it's a little bit more realistic. But as you can see here, it's still hitting our actual capsule component, which is sending our character flying in the air over and over. You can also see here, we still have our capsule component, which you can run around. And there's a lot of stuff that is wrong. So let's go ahead and fix all that. So when our character is hit, we actually don't want them to be able to move around. We'll go ahead and get our character movement, disable movement. That way they can't move around. Then we're going to do a delay for about 5 seconds, so they can't move for about 5 seconds. And then after 5 seconds, we can go ahead and set simulate physics. We can change this back to do not simulate. You're going to see this little node here looks really annoying. It's not all straightened out. You can actually add reroute nodes by double clicking and then double click again. Just like so, so it's a little bit more neat. And then off of here, we want to attach component to component. We want to attach our mesh, our character mesh, back to our capsule component so that our character gets reattached to our capsule component, the one that we control and move around. We want to keep this to snap the target, and then keep relative scale. Drag off of the mesh, set relative location. Relative location will be 0, 0, and then negative 95. The reason why we're doing this is because if we were to just attach our mesh back to our component after ragdolling, it would be in a weird rotation, all that stuff, and so we need to reset the rotation to what it is in the viewport. If you select the viewport, you can see here our rotation. That's exactly what we're doing here. And then off of the mesh, we want to do set relative rotation as well. Hook that up and set the Z to negative 90. And last but not least, we need to let them move their character around. So we'll do get the character movement and set movement mode walking. So that will basically undo everything that happens here. So we're setting the physics, adding an impulse so they go flying, stopping the movement, waiting for 5 seconds, and then we're undoing all that by undo set simulate physics, attach the mesh back to our component, set its location rotation back to normal, and then allow the character to move around freely. So now, if we compile save, I'm going to go ahead and move this soccer stuff out of the way and move this like so. hit play, we can run into there and see our character fly. And you can see we're still getting hit by this mesh. We can't move around though. And so let's go ahead and fix that real quick. And so what exactly is happening is our capsule collision is still there and it's still hitting it over and over and over, which keeps adding an impulse and sends our character flying a little bit. So instead of doing that, what we can do is we can add a new variable. We'll type Boolean. We can say is knocked out question mark. And so before we do everything here, and again, I'm just going to select everything and move it over. Before we hit our character, we're going to check and see, get our is knocked out, do a branch. So check and see if our character is knocked out. Because if it is knocked out, then we don't want to do anything because it's already waiting on the ground. If not, we want to set the variable to is knocked out. And then at the very end, we want to set our variable back to normal so that they aren't knocked out. And another thing is actually back in the hit actor, I want to go to the hit actor mesh. And under the collisions here, I want to custom and let the camera ignore the camera. So that's again for the hit actor mesh, collision settings, custom, camera ignore. That way we don't have that thing running in our camera. So look at that. It only does it once and it's not colliding with our camera. We respawn, we can run, hits our character like that. So that's cool and all, but let's go ahead and actually adjust the value for how much it hits our character for. So let's actually change this to something like 50,000. So now when we do this add impulse, we should send our character flying a lot more. There we go. So now we can respawn here. If we run into this, we're going to send our character flying in the air. And then we respawn. Okay, so let's say you wanted to add actually more of these hit actors by just alt dragging them out like so. If we hit play, they're all spinning in the same direction. Let's say we want to have them spin in different directions. That way they're all not spinning at the same rotation. So one way we could do that is if we go into our hit actor blueprint in our rotating movement, we see our rotation rate and it's rotating 180 degrees on the z-axis. And we can actually change that variable. We don't want to change it in here, but what we want to do is we want to create a new variable and we want to change this to the vector type. We can change this to rotation rate. Compile and save that. I want to instance editable expose on spawn. And in our event begin play, in our event graph, we'll add a event begin play. And what we'll do is we'll get our rotating movement, new set rotation rate. And it looks like we actually need to change this vector to a rotator type variable. So we can click change variable type. Compile, save that. Get our rotator rate and set that in like so. So this will allow us to change this rotator movement value to this value that we set and what we set it and expose it on spawn. So let's go ahead and give this a default value of 180 on the z-axis. That way it just has a default spin. So now if we go into our editor, we can actually select these and you can see we have this node rotation rate. So we can do something like negative 180 and then negative 140 maybe. Save that, play. You can see these are rotating at different rates and we can actually even change this even more. If we do this like -50, 100, they're going to be rotating at all different rates. Actually, you can see that's a little bit too slow for us. So actually, we'll go ahead and do this -180 again. 180 like so. And so they're all rotating at different lengths. It makes it a little bit trickier to run in. And we can define these variables in our viewport and in our scene instead of duplicating our actor multiple times to have different values and so on. We can just use the power of Blueprint to expose a variable and have it be different for each actor in our scene. One more fix also, if you equip your hat and if you get hit by a hit actor, you're going to notice you start bugging out. And that's because the collision on our hat mesh right here needs to actually be set to nothing. So if you go into third person character, hat mesh, we want to set the collision from block all to no collision. Now if we hit play, we can equip our hat, get hit by an actor, and it will look all normal like usual. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be a wrap for this video. We've learned how to create a simple open and closed door, to a hat pickup, to then adding damage to our character, having a health bar, also healing our character, creating a little soccer goal blueprint that respawns the soccer ball, to then creating a little hit actor that hits our character and simulates physics. I hope you guys learned a lot in this Blueprint beginner tutorial. I'm going to make another tutorial following this one up called Blueprint Intermediate, and then another tutorial called Blueprint Advanced. So in the intermediate, we're going to talk about more common things that you can create in Blueprint. And then in the advanced, we're going to take things a bit further and talk about some advanced topics in Blueprint. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe button. I put a lot of effort into these tutorials and videos, and you guys do not want to miss out in any future tutorials. So anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.